Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dido webinar for Shadow IT and how Google Workspace can help. I'm Evan Schmidt, one of the Google Workspace engineers here at Dido, and I'll be taking us through the topic of Shadow IT. I'll be able to cover what Shadow IT is and what some of its impacts are. I'll talk about how Shadow IT fits into the Google ecosystem and how we can help with managing your currently unmanaged users, if there are any, which most likely there are. And we'll segue into talking about potentially consolidating other systems and leveraging Google tools to increase security, increase agility, increase collaboration, and potentially reduce costs overall. And we'll go through some next steps if this is something that's on your radar or something that we can potentially help with. So just kicking it off here with a quick introduction and look at the possible impacts of Shadow IT. What is it? What does it mean? How does it impact my users? Or more specifically, why are my users doing it? So at a high level, Shadow IT just refers to information system or technology systems deployed by departments other than the IT department, usually to work around some shortcoming of another system. So sometimes this is user preference. Sometimes this is because a user is trying to obtain some feature that they don't have currently, or some application that their client or their partner or their vendor is using, and they need to collaborate with those folks better. In general, what's very challenging about Shadow IT is that it is slightly insidious because on some level, we actually want our users to be doing their job the best way that they can. But with Shadow IT, there are some trade-offs that come along with that. So from an impact standpoint, when we think about the benefits, we think about agility. They don't have to wait for IT to provision accounts and configure environments that might be rigid. Users that just go spin up an account without IT's consent usually can do it the way that they want. And that enables them to innovate, potentially, to explore avenues that the rest of the organization is maybe too slow, or just the ship can't turn on a dime when maybe a smaller team can. It also often helps with productivity. And this is one of the huge reasons we see users going out and doing Shadow IT. They spin up their own systems or their own consumer-grade accounts because they have some task that they need to go get done. They know a tool that can do it. And so they do what we pay them for. They do their job the best way that they know how, without necessarily looking at things like security, compliance, and administration. So some of those drawbacks, definitely wasted time and efficiencies. This might seem a little bit contradictory. I just said that one of the benefits of Shadow IT is that it provides agility. But essentially, the agility that the end users are perceiving also builds on, there's a lot of terms for it, but technical debt is maybe one. Essentially, at some point, someone is going to need to go into that system and pull it under the IT umbrella to ensure that security and compliance requirements are being met. So while this team is saving time now, they're creating work later. Also worth noting that they're siloing themselves. So while they might be gaining productivity for themselves, for other teams that are out there, we'll talk about file storage as one of our examples today. And Google Drive is a very phenomenal storage and sharing platform that's incredibly secure when configured correctly. But if users are leveraging consumer-grade accounts, they're essentially siloing themselves from other users within the organization, kind of taking any existing tools that have been stood up for storage and sharing and saying, well, we don't want to use those for whatever reason, so we use our own, which might make it difficult to work with that team. So definitely there are inefficiencies there. Compliance issues might become a huge deal, especially if employees store sensitive information on consumer accounts or non-IT accounts. Compliance can be a very, very challenging problem with Shadow IT because it can be extremely challenging to measure exactly what data might be living in those non-IT accounts. Usually one of the advantages of an IT managed account is that when there is a compliance concern or breach, our systems have audit logs and reporting capabilities and triage scenarios where admins have controls for handling incidents. With a consumer account, and usually all of the data just lives on that account. There's not much that we can do to scan the individual sensitive data and understand what types of compliance issues might have occurred. There can also be some brand identity challenges. If you have two of your users working with a third-party vendor and one is using, let's call it Outlook. Your organization is using Microsoft for email and calendar, and one of your users sends their calendar invite from Outlook. Another user has gone and spun up a Google Calendar account, and they send their calendar invites from Google Calendar. This can become confusing for potential vendors, partners, contractors, folks that your team works with, because they're getting a mixed signal about which system is kind of the official system of your organization. Now, both of them are generally speaking valid. So for an individual meeting, this may not impact it. But from a brand identity standpoint, the tools that you use are associated with the brand that you create. So having a more unified approach can have some pretty distinct benefits, and can really impact the overall organization. Then this is just the personal biggest one that I encounter with my customers: risk of data loss or leaks. Essentially, if you have users that are going and spinning up shadow IT accounts and services, there's no governance over or controls over those accounts when that user leaves the organization. So they are often able to take information with them intentionally or unintentionally in a way that the IT team can't measure, or at least can't measure well. And essentially, since those are consumer grade accounts with consumer grade terms of service, essentially the business has no recourse to potentially recover data that was stored in those accounts. So data might become lost, and things that were shared with people, it might go away, or that user might even take information with them to their next role, which there's another legal conversation. Is it possible to litigate that? Maybe, but it's definitely a huge, expensive headache, in the meantime. And then just overall dysfunction. Again, I pointed to where there are wasted times and siloizations. I pointed to where users can take information with them. I pointed to the brand identity conflict and the compliance concerns. Having many users in multiple disparate systems is, generally speaking, not a well-optimized approach. So in the shadow IT, or in the world of addressing shadow IT, there are a lot of things that can kind of be going wrong here, a lot of additional burden on the IT team to kind of rein that back in. And at the end of the day, the users are doing this to do their job better. That's usually their motivation for spinning up shadow IT accounts. So in general, our response should not be shut it all down. If we have compliance requirements, it might need to be shut it all down when we find shadow IT. But it should also be a conversation of investigating and understanding, okay, why did they do this? What was the use case? Is it compelling? Might the organization benefit from using the tools that the users know and love? So, to that end, I want to talk a little bit about how shadow IT works in the Google ecosystem, and especially with Gmail and Calendar and Drive and AdWords and Analytics and some of these other tools. So when Google accounts are being used as shadow IT, users can sign up using free accounts with their professional address. So if I go register a Google Drive account, I can use my professional address. And if I have a valid receiving email account, I can set up Google Drive using my professional address, even if we use Microsoft for email and Dropbox for files and other systems for other systems, I can go spin up my Google Drive account using my professional address if you haven't taken steps to prevent this, and we can help with those steps. Sometimes users will also forward their email to Gmail. We know that people love Gmail and Calendar. There are billions of people using them at the consumer grade. There are millions of people using them professionally using Google Workspace. And so people often like to bring it to their work, especially recent college grads, where I think it's more than 90% of colleges and universities in the US have some footprint in Google Workspace. So if you have recent college grads that are just trying to get their work done, they might go spin up consumer grade Google accounts. And unfortunately, without prior approval of IT in kind of configuring that correctly or with the right security controls, triage actions, etc. And then there's another category of YouTube channels and business services. Users often will create consumer grade accounts for business purposes using their business address for those professional grade services like AdWords, Analytics, Blogger, Maps, Google Cloud Platform. There are a ton of different services that a user might do that for. The fun fact here is, or maybe not so fun if you're the IT person who's trying to help with this scenario, but Google has more than 100 services that users might be spinning up and down accounts for. And if you don't provide your users with a Google account, when they go sign up for AdWords, Analytics, Google Cloud Platform, these professional grade services, they have to go use a consumer grade account, which essentially means they own all of the information stored on the account. And even if they have a contract with your business that says, well, actually, we own anything that's on that account, if they leave the organization, the consumer terms of service don't allow for much in the way of litigating for those accounts. They could always come back and just say, well, there's nothing on that account and I lost the password and I can't recover it. And no amount of submitting tickets to Google is going to persuade them to support the consumer account for that level of detailed recovery in those very important cases. So better in our view than to manage the Google accounts for them and provide them with those accounts so that they can access the services that they need. All it takes for them to sign up for one of these Google services using their professional account is one email verification link. They get that email, they click the link, they're up and running. So what can we actually do to help? Google and Dido are here to help with this process. Google has built tools and technology, excuse me, to help uncover these scenarios, and Dido has professional services to help implement, to scope, to provide education, and to help understand the true footprint of shadow IT within the organization. And the first tool that I want to talk about is the transfer tool for unmanaged users that Google has added to their Google admin service. Once you have verified that you're the owner of a domain, so your professional domain, the one that folks are using for email, you don't need to change your MX records to point to Google, and you can run this unmanaged users tool to get an understanding of which users exist in consumer accounts that have associated their professional email address. What's great about this is you can actually ask them to transfer their existing Google account into your managed Google service, your managed Google admin, your managed Google Workspace, which means the user can just receive an invitation, click accept, and suddenly you have full governance and controls and security measures. You can all of the data is now owned by the organization instead of the end user. It essentially addresses all of the major trade-offs from a compliance, security, and IT standpoint if someone accepts that invitation into the organizational account. So for those users that have gone out and spun up their own consumer-grade accounts, this is kind of and I'm going to put quotes around this, this is kind of like the silver bullet for getting those accounts underneath the IT umbrella. Beyond the unmanaged users tool, we also have monitoring, and we suggest doing some change management with both end users and admins. So I mentioned that the only thing the users really need to do to sign up for these accounts is get a verification email. So if we configure a mail routing rule to catch the verification emails and notify admins, then admins can then reach out to the users to address the real need. And we urge our customers to encourage collaboration, to encourage agility and efficiency, not to discourage it just in the name of security. So rather than just hard preventing them, we can prevent them from setting up those accounts. But rather than just stopping there, what we found very useful is to go to those users and ask the question, why? Why do you need that account? What are you setting it up for? What is the critical business need? And are there other folks that would benefit from using those tools for the same reason that you are? And that enables us to say, okay, if this is a valid case, we'll create the Google Workspace account, and suddenly we can manage this user underneath our IT umbrella. But on the other side of that, if a user just says, well, I don't like Outlook and I like Gmail better, as an organization, it's probably worth us considering why that is and why Gmail is so popular and why so many organizations are switching to and using it. But at a higher level, it's challenging to run multiple email platforms. Possible, but challenging. So we probably would want to ask the question for the whole organization, were that the case. And in general, what I've seen is that for users that prefer Gmail, they are usually either trying to get a built-in Google search engine for their email, or they're comfortable and familiar using our features like priority inboxes or filters, and those help them to be more efficient. On the other side of that, if they're spinning that up on a consumer-grade account, they may not necessarily be contributing to the efficiency of the organization. So we need to be intelligent about how we deploy those accounts, if we allow it in general. And then finally, there's a change management component here of ensuring that your admins and end users that are caught up in these scenarios are well educated and well informed about the decisions that they're making. So in the case that you do uncover, let's say you've spun up your Google Workspace admin console and run the Unmanaged Users tool, and you discover that 20% of the organization is using some type of consumer-grade account. And by the way, that's a conservative number. We often see much higher than that, especially in enterprise organizations where folks feel constrained by the tools that they have. And they reach out to try and obtain their own when they need them. But from the admin side, when we're thinking about change management, we're thinking about two things. We're thinking about training, and we're thinking about communicating the right information for admins, and then documenting that process. So admins have all of the enablement materials that they need to potentially address an incident when it occurs, when there is some new shadow IT incident. Your admins should know how to leverage the transfer tool for unmanaged users. They should know how to send an invite to a user. And in the case where the consumer account that's being used isn't associated with the professional address, your admins should know what to do there as well. And in general, we have this concept in Google Drive called a shared drive that enables you to actually move information from a consumer grade account into a professional grade account fairly quickly. You can do it quite a lot of information at a time without needing to go document by document. And you don't need to like download everything and then wait and then re-upload everything and then wait. There's better ways to do it if some type of manual migration needs to occur to preserve the continuity of corporate information. On the end user side, remember, these are users that are trying to be agile, collaborative, efficient. They are trying to do their job the best that they can. So again, we don't just want to shut it down. We want to reach out proactively, understand the use case, prepare them to accept the invitation that we send if we're going to send them a transfer invitation. This is key. If you send an invitation and users do not accept that invitation, We do have some mitigation approaches that we can maybe get them the invitation back, but it's a bit challenging and depends on how you've configured your email environment for whether or not they'll even be able to do that. So ideally, users should accept their first invitation to avoid creating additional work later on. And then we typically would want to provide guidance for those end users on moving files to a shared drive if the transfer tool won't work for some reason. One reason might be because they use their personal Gmail account, which means some of the information on that account is corporate and some of the information on that account is consumer. So they don't want to accept the invitation. In those types of cases, usually a shared drive makes the most sense for moving files in, and usually the user is going to need to take some action to migrate that information rather than just clicking on the accept invitation kind of button. All right. And then just wrapping up here by going through kind of one of the recurring themes about the conversation today, which is this idea of, well, actually, Google's tools are quite powerful and very effective for end users. That's why we see so many end users going out of their way to set up these tools for themselves, whether it's Google Drive, Google Meet, our docs, sheets, and slides editors, even Gmail. And so it's important to note that depending on which services your users want to leverage, those kind of core Google Workspace applications, or even professional grade services like, or other professional grade services like AdWords and analytics and YouTube, things like that, running a YouTube channel, is that you can actually obtain a type of license in Google Workspace called Workspace Essentials. And Workspace Essentials is a managed Google admin. So you have the ability to own and manage your users' accounts. And from a provisioning standpoint and an IT governance, security, and compliance standpoint, without needing to alter your MX records or configure any specific changes to your mail routing. And this essentially will give you the tools that you need to rein in your shadow IT from Google services, especially Google Drive, with the IT managed Google account. So that's our first suggestion here is use Google Workspace, use Workspace Essentials that can be added to your current stack without disrupting any of your current services, give you insight into which users are leveraging consumer accounts, and give users that need the ability to use these tools, the professional Google Workspace tools, to do their jobs, the tools that they need. Also worth noting that if you have many different cloud storage systems in use, if you have people that are using Box and Dropbox and Ignite and OneDrive and SharePoint, Google Drive is an excellent way to consolidate all of those many services. There are other softwares from a security standpoint, from a productivity, collaboration, and communication standpoint that we can see consolidating into Google Workspace. Another one would be if you have many users that are using either paid or free Zoom. Google Workspace Essentials comes with Google Meet. So you can potentially reduce costs in other areas as well by consolidating that under the Google platform. So if this was interesting, if this was compelling, if you have questions or need help driving this forward, head over to ditoweb.com/contact. Our team works directly with the Google team responsible for kind of handling shadow IT, providing analysis. And Google Workspace Essentials is the first step that we would advise toward reining in that shadow IT by running that unmanaged users tool to get the picture for which users might be doing some shadow IT. Also, Google Workspace Essentials gives the employees the tools that they love while ensuring that security and compliance needs are being met. And then from the Dido side, we'll provide professional services around shadow IT to ensure that we're bringing the best of Google Workspace to the organization. We're helping to rein in shadow IT. We're helping to set it up correctly and right the first time. Our role as the Google partner here is to ensure the overall successful usage of the platform. So for all of the training and change management that goes along with both end user and admins leveraging this platform, that's where Dido would be able to provide our insight and expertise. So again, that's didoweb.com/contact, and you can fill in the form and note in the how can we help the Shadow IT webinar, and we'll get you connected to the right folks. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch. I really hope that this was useful, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye-bye.